We're in Vancouver attending the Office of the Special Interlocutors Conference on Data Sovereignty in Vancouver, BC. I've been able to provide support to the team that's planned the conference. I've been involved with residential school for about 35 years, so having them come back here is good so that we can continue the work.
Do you remember approximately what years you were at St. Joseph's?
For 4 years, between, I want to say 65 to maybe 68. I was maybe 14, 15 years old. For myself, my experience was, I think it was difficult like anybody else's, being away from home and separated from family and being forced to stay in a residential school. But also, I lost my dad when I was young, so I learned how to fend for myself and protect myself and speak up for myself all the time. So being in the residential school, I think we went through the regular regimental processes of daily life, you know, just not being able to speak our language, just having so much discipline, but also just conforming to whatever they thought was best for us, including the pipe band that I refer to, where learning Scottish music instead of our traditional drumming and dancing, you know, that brought its own challenges. I think even if we should have been happy that we were traveling around BC or across the country as a pipe band, little did I know that years later that this is where a lot of the abuse was happening, was within the band or within the residential school that I went to. That certainly wasn't my experience. At the same time, I've been able to have the trust of many survivors and victims to be able to let me know what their stories were and to know that those things happened when I was there. I know that he attended residential school in the early 1900s, and in the early 1900s is when we know from our own Alki Residential School inquiry that there was a lot of what they called flogging, where they would hang the children on posts and beat them until they passed out. That's a term that's a process that I came to understand through reading documents later that came from Europe, you know, where you just flog the children and beat them, you know, to listen. So I know that in the early 1900s that was common at our residential school. But I also know that that's what my grandpa went through. He committed suicide in 1920. There was a group of them that agreed that they would all die together, but he was the only one that died. The others survived. They ate poisonous hemlock and died. But in the process, to me, what is so disturbing about all of it is that they never let my family know. They just buried him there. And I know because, again, our family wrote letters to Indian Affairs to ask for our other relative to be released from there in case he might die too. You know, so those are parts of government record. If you go back in records, it's the letter is there. And so that was in the 1920s. And I didn't go to residential school until the 60s. So my mom never talked about what happened to Grandpa. And she was very Catholic and probably was afraid to speak about it. I only found out about it when I was working with the Caribou Tribal Council and doing research on St. Joseph's Mission, where our chiefs asked for research to be done. Okay, we've got the residential school. What happened there? How did the residential school come to be? So we had a researcher document St. Joseph's Mission, and in her research was able to identify numerous incidences of tragic deaths in the school. And one of them was Grandpa. So she was able to find the documents and articulate that in the book Victims of Benevolence that I mentioned this morning when I spoke. When she provided her report to me, I saw the information and I don't want to say I was shocked, but Mom never talked about that. So I went to ask her about it, and when she was still alive, and she just said, yeah, that happened. But she still didn't want to talk, and I never did force anything on my mom to be able to speak. So throughout the years, I've known that he is buried there somewhere. I know that in the past, in the 70s, in the 80s, late 80s, 90s, I always made reference to children that were missing, but nobody would listen. And it's not until the Kamloops disclosed the 215 children that people finally took everything serious. So it's not something that people didn't know about, including the RCMP, including the government, because later, in trying to research and find and see where Grandpa might be, the government and the police knew about these things back in those days. I think it's unfortunate that while we go through this process to find Grandpa, that we still have to be pushing for records, pushing for information that may be able to help us understand and really know what happened to him and where he might be. At the same time, I don't want to be one that will wait for the governments or churches to ever come clean with any of the information. I've never been that kind of person. I think I grew up over the last few years, and especially the last 30, 35 years, as a survivor and as an advocate, to know that we have to fight for every little bit of information and truth that we could have and need in order for these families and communities to have closure. So I've been that voice. It's been important for me to give voice to people, not only myself, but so that people know and understand that so many children were impacted. I think that there's information missing and there's gaps in what is missing. But again, that's where I really encourage the public or any institution that's had anything to do with residential school to be proactive, and let us know, I've got information that may be helpful for you. To me, that's what reconciliation is. Why do we have to drag you kicking and screaming, to share with us so that we can heal? I don't get it. The only thing I worry about when people withhold information is that there's something that they're very scared of, and so be it. But one way or the other, we'll get to the truth. We'll find documents. We will know what happened to our children. We will find them, and we will have closure with or without you.